everyone. Welcome to Mind, Body, Fitness, and Recovery. I'm Pam. I'm a recovery life coach and nutritionist, and I've also been in recovery from toxic relationships myself for 3.5 years. This is a redo from yesterday's video that I already uploaded. The topic is still the same, trauma bonding and how we can recover from it. I left out a few things that I really wanted to put in the video, and they're important for us to understand exactly what happens when someone is emotionally and mentally trauma bonded to another person. So I was going to start the other video with an email that I had from a woman who was really struggling with the pain that she was feeling now that she was out of her relationship. She left her abuser, and she was 2 weeks out, and she was struggling with the pain that she was feeling. She was feeling this excruciating pain that she was missing him, and she didn't understand why she was feeling like that because she had gone through some really severe verbal trauma in her relationship with this man, and she was really struggling with why she was feeling this and what she was feeling. What was it? So instead of reading the email from this woman, I decided to actually tell you about my own experience with trauma bonding. I remember the minute that I realized that I was in trouble. There was something going on inside me that I did not understand. I had left a relationship that I knew was not good for me. It wasn't good for him either. We were two disordered people, but disordered in different ways. I was allowing the treatment that he was offering me. I stayed, and he was all too willing to have me stay because I was the one that he was able to verbally and mentally abuse, and that in turn he felt better about himself, because if I was always feeling down and sad and confused and emotionally exhausted, that made him feel better about himself. So back to the moment that I realized I was standing in my kitchen against my counter, and like I said, I'd been out of the relationship for 2 weeks, and this excruciating emotional pain came over me. I actually slumped to the floor, and I sat there, and I let out this. It wasn't just a cry. It was like a scream type of cry. And I heard myself. I put my hands over my ears, and I stayed there for about 10 minutes. I couldn't move. I was frozen. And I think part of the reason why I couldn't move was because it was at that moment that I realized something really bad was going on for me emotionally. So I got up off the floor, and I immediately went to Google, and I Googled what I was going through, and immediately I found that there was a possibility that I was trauma bonded. Now, a trauma bond is an attachment. It's an excruciatingly painful attachment to a toxic person that the victim has been in a relationship with. The victim gets addicted to the highs of the relationship, the good times. Of course, there are highs and lows, but the brain of someone who is being abused gets addicted to the highs and the lows of oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. So much so that they know the relationship is really bad at times, and at other times it's really good. The abuser makes it like this. They know that if they give us just enough good stuff, they can pull back with the bad stuff, and we're always going to want to get to the good stuff again. So those are the highs and the lows of the relationship, and we get addicted to the highs. We know that if we're good enough, that if I was pretty enough, that if I dressed good enough, sexy enough, that if I cleaned the house well enough, or if I just acted better, then I would get those good times back. So the bad times you think of as something that will pass, and just to get to the good times. So the victim will stay in this relationship at the expense of their emotional, mental, and sometimes physical well-being. So I was out of this relationship for 2 weeks, like I said, and I started to get they were panic attacks, they were painful, I was really anxious, and I desperately wanted to see this person again, knowing everything I had gone through with them, knowing that I was the one who said, you need to leave. And part of me was kind of hoping that he wouldn't leave, but he did. I think he knew that this relationship was done. So I actually blocked his number. Then I actually had to change my phone number. I thought that was best, and it was, because I tried to go no contact. I had heard of this, and I knew it was the way to go, to try and detox this person from my life, from my soul, from my brain, from my emotional and mental state, so I could get back to a healthy physical, emotional, and mental state of well-being. But what happened was the opposite started to happen, and I didn't understand what was going on. I knew it was a possible trauma bond. I was hoping that every time my phone rang, that it would be him. He didn't know my number, but I was hoping somehow he would find out. And eventually, he did. And I was relieved that he was calling me. It made me feel wanted. It made me feel good. It made me feel special. I forgot about all the lies, all the betrayal, all the deceptions, all the cheating, all the false hopes, all the future faking that was going on. Oh, and someday we'll do this, and someday we'll do this, knowing all along that there was never a plan for any of that. And I told him not to show up at my house, when inside I was hoping that he would show up at my house. And what I would tell myself is, well, if he ever showed up, I wouldn't let him in. So 3 weeks, I think it was 3 to 4 weeks after I left the relationship, he did show up at my door. And I remember going to the door and seeing him, and I felt relief. I felt I was able to breathe again. I knew what was coming. I knew that he wasn't going to engage in the bad behavior, and I knew intuitively, I knew intellectually that he was going to be just as sweet and loving as he could during the high times in the relationship. But I told myself I wasn't going to let him in. And then after about 3 minutes, I made the decision to let him in. And we sat there talking, and sure enough, it came out of his mouth. I knew this was going to happen. I really miss you. I cry every day without you. I miss seeing you. I miss talking to you. I miss our talks. And in my head, my body is feeling all this relief, like I just got a fix of, and I knew in my body, and I knew in my neurotransmitters, in my pathway, my neurotransmitter pathway, what was going on. That the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin was being released in my body, and I did. I'll say it again. I felt like I could breathe. But as I was listening to all this that he was saying, I was saying to myself, "This isn't true. What are you doing, Pam? You know this isn't true." Intellectually and intuitively, I knew that was never going to happen. And I knew that if it did, that if he came back, all that other stuff, all that BS was going to happen all over again. And I was going to seek those highs. I was going to get through those lows just to seek those highs again. Now remember, I myself was a disordered person in this relationship. I wasn't the abuser, but I was the enabler. I allowed it. I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't think that I could get out of it. And it was because of the wounds my soul wounds that I had encountered when I was a child through the relationship that I had with my parents. This was the reason why I grew up. And this is how my relationships with men always went. I was always trying to make the relationships better, fix the relationship so I could kind of mentally fix the relationship that I had with my father, which was not a good one. I was not treated well at all. I learned very young that women were not to be treated well by the way he treated me and my mother, the way he verbally abused me and my mother, and the way he physically abused me whenever he felt like it, with a hit, the belt, and name calling with both of us. So when I was very young, I learned my worth as a woman. I didn't have worth as a woman. So as I grew up, I would find this in my relationships with men, and it never worked out like that. It never, because of who I was, because of what I felt like my worth was as a woman, I sought out, and these men sought me out. It's kind of like attracts like. The disordered attracts the disordered. The insecure attracts the insecure. The unimportant ego and soul attracts another seemingly unimportant ego or soul. That's how we saw ourselves, as unimportant and unworthy. So when you get two people like this together, usually it's most of the time, a lot of the times it's the man who's the abuser and the woman will be the victim of that abuse. However, this happens in all different types of relationships. Homosexual relationships, two men, lesbian relationships with two women. It happens in all types of relationships, this type of abuse. And in these types of relationships, the abuser is often called a narcissist. We'll go into that in another video. So back to, I would sit there with him during his first visit, and I remember thinking all these things, like, intuitively, he should not be there, but emotionally, I wanted him there. And then I realized that he shouldn't be there, so I said, you need to leave now. And it was painful for me to have him leave, because I knew that when he left, that I was going to start that excruciating pain of wanting him back there again. I knew that was going to happen. But intellectually, I knew I had to go through this to get to the other side. This had to happen. I hadn't taken care of my wounds way before this. I hadn't taken care of them. I had another relationship like this several years before. And when that relationship ended, I did not take the time to find out why I stayed in that relationship for so long and put myself through so much emotional and mental abuse. So he would leave, and I'd be okay for a couple days. Then he wouldn't try to call me. He wouldn't come over, and I would go through this excruciating pain of missing him, wanting the relationship back, asking myself things like, did I make a mistake? I think I made a mistake. I think he should be back here. And when my phone would ring, I would look at my phone, and I would know that he doesn't have my number. And eventually he did find my number, and he did call me. And I would look at my phone, and I would get that wash of relief again. Almost like, I've never done heroin, but I can only imagine that a trauma bond is the addiction to another person is likened to the fix of a heroin addict. It's just that deep and that visceral and that physiologically bound. So eventually, as I recovered over the weeks and over several months, I realized what was happening to me. And I went back and I dug back deep, deep, deep. And I found out that when I was a child, what had happened to me, that was abuse, that should not have happened. And that's when my recovery really took off, when I could say to myself, I shouldn't have been treated like that. That was the first time I ever told myself that. My parents had done such a good job of teaching me how worthless I was, that's how I grew up. I went through middle school, high school, college, and entered my relationships and entered marriages like that. And I had a daughter as well. So there were a few things that now that I want to share with you that have really helped in my own recovery. And this is what I tell a lot of my clients, that you need to start with the basics, and taking care of yourself physically is one of the most important things you can do for your physical body as well. And one of them is you try not to say and one of them is making sure that you stay hydrated. This is a 24-ounce mason jar. It has lemon juice in it as well, that I fill before I go to bed. So when I wake up in the morning, before I have coffee or food in my stomach, as soon as I wake up, I have 24 ounces of room temperature water, and I drink that. I don't even make my coffee. I don't even set my coffee pot anymore to start the coffee before I wake up. And I kind of miss smelling it as I'm still lying there in bed after my alarm goes off. But what was happening was, if I knew the coffee was right there, I wouldn't drink the water first, or I'd have only like 8 ounces, and I would have the coffee. Then I would start to drink my water again. That's not the habit that I wanted to get into. So I don't even take my coffee pot out from underneath my cabinet until I have 20 ounces of water, and I wait 20 to 30 minutes before I have coffee or food. That cleanses, hydrates, and energizes my body. It cleanses out the toxins from my body, from my colon, in my stomach, my colon, my bladder, and everything gets flushed out first thing in the morning. The second thing I always make sure that I do is I stay away from processed foods as much as I can. And one of the things that I love to include in my diet are crackers. So I was on the journey to find the cleanest cracker that I could. And trust me on this when I say I have done my homework as far as processed foods versus clean foods go. So the goal for us, the goal for anyone really, but especially the goal for somebody who's in recovery from being in toxic, abusive relationships, is you want to make sure that you stay clear of as much processed food as you can. So these are crackers that I found in my local grocery store. Now, I live in the Boston area, if you haven't already heard the accent, and we have a grocery store called Market Basket. And you can find these in the produce aisle, the frozen food aisle. They're called ACMAC, and they only have 6 ingredients in them. This, again, I've done my homework on this. I've done the research. This is the cleanest cracker that I can find. So you can add this to your non-processed food cabinet. The next thing is meditation. I found out that if I do 4 rounds of deep breathing, anywhere, anytime, 4 rounds of deep breathing, in for 4, hold for 4, and out for 4, I have just meditated. You breathe in for 4, hold for 4, and then breathe out for 4. And I use 4 rounds. You can do as many as you want. You've just meditated, and you've given your lungs and your body a really, really big hug. And also, this is a good book that I read, and I've written a short summary on it. It's called The 4 Agreements, and it was written by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a very short but powerful read. So I can put it right here for you to see. It's a short but powerful read, and here's the summary. And I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to read right off of my notes. The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Agreement 1. Be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. Avoid using your words against yourself to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of love and truth. Agreement number 2. Don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own insecurities, their own fears, and their own environment. When you are immune to the actions and words of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. Agreement number 3. Don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. And agreement number 4. Always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are tired as opposed to when you are well rested. Under any circumstance, simply do your best, and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. So as always, like, comment, subscribe, and especially share this with someone who you think might benefit from a little bit of what I've told you about my story with trauma bonding and the other things that I shared with you in this video. So thanks so much for being here. Thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. And I want to leave you with this. The last word in this statement is universe, but you can substitute that for God, source, angels, divine, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And here it is. Your happiness is a direct reflection of your level of faith in the universe. Namaste. Bye.